Alright, first thing is you're going to have to take off the bumper. You have one bolt that goes to here on each side, and it goes to this long thing. It looks like this. So the one bolt goes to this hole. And you have two here, and they can be taken out from the front. Let's see. They look like this, and they have this backing plate. Don't lose it. Keeps it from turning when you're disassembling. And then you remove the bumper carefully. If you have wires like I do, you have to take these bulbs out. That's the easy way. And then the wheel needs to come off. Then disconnect your sway bar link. Had to cut my bolt off. The nut was all rusted. And if you have any other stuff that's in the way, like the guy before me had these airbags, and he explicitly put these airbags in here to conceal the fact that there were bad leaf springs. Instead of just spending the money on the leaf springs, he decided to put these. This would jack stand under the frame rail and support the truck by that. When you lower your jack, you'll see the axle drops down away from the frame. You have better access to work here. I'm gonna finish cutting off this airbag. Okay. Now I freed up my airbag from the top. So now I'm gonna cut these bolts. These are U-bolts. You cut it on both sides, on each one, and they'll pop when they come free. I can't really get to the one behind here, so I'm trying to break it. I only halfway cut it here. This is the driver's side. It's probably a little bit harder to get to. There we go. All right. Get it off. Now it should be. Oh wow. Oh, it's a separate piece on this side. Okay, so. Yeah, down there, separate piece on this side. Good to know. I guess it's welded over there. So those will need to be driven out right here, these studs. At this point you can lower the axle the rest of the way. Should go down quite far. Then you have this gap right here. So the shock is a little tricky because mine has pressure, but not impossible. Kind of compress the shock and move it. So there, so my shock is off there. It's kind of growing, but it will stop. And then there's a line-up pin on the top of the leaf spring, so that's how you line up this thing again. There's a hole down there. So now to the business of taking out the main bolts. This is the key of why we take off the bumper. This, it's not possible to really hit this hard with the bumper on. It's very tough to move it, so that's why we take the bumper off. And also, there's this tiny screw right there. Right there. Take that out. So this little bracket gets in the way when you're taking out the bolt. I don't know why they do this, but you can see the bolt head is this way and the nut is this way. So I think it's so you can torch the nut because you can't really do any torch work on this side. It's too compact and you'll burn something up. So you take this little bracket off here, and then that gives you access when you drive out that bolt. So now we need to see if this bolt will come free. I like to put a breaker bar back here. It's a little bit better than a wrench. And 24. As expected, this won't come off. I'm gonna hit it with a torch and get it a little red, and it should come off. It's red. We need to get this bolt out without destroying it, if possible, so it needs to cool down. And it does have a small head on it, non-threaded. So technically, we can hit that, but it's really hot. It's gonna bend that bolt if I hit it. So I'm gonna wait till it cools down. And the last time I did have the nut on, I wasn't very happy with the results. Not sure what I'm gonna do this time. Let me just let it cool and we'll try. Alright, I went after this thing with a hammer, and I don't know if you can see, but basically it's opening up the bracket and staying inside the leaf spring. So we're gonna burn up the inside of this leaf spring a little bit and see if that helps. As you can see, this is not a job for someone without a torch. It's impossible to unseize that without a torch. So, rear is easier. I believe it's the same size nut. Alright, I already removed it, but you gotta take the bolt out of the rear of the spring. It's a little hard to get past the drive shaft, so what you do is you raise up the axle tube, and then that'll give you clearance to get your little bolt past the drive line right there. And then the leaf spring should move towards the rear, so you just have to make sure that your guide pin is not in the hole. So there's a gap I can put my finger, so I should be able to hammer this from the front. So I need to free this off of the swing shackle right there before I'm going to be able to get it out. Once you have your spring out, you need to make sure this hole is mostly clear. That's your lineup hole. Front bolts is pretty hard to put in, so I'm going to do it first. Doesn't need to be tight. This is hard to show you when I'm recording, but basically you have to push this shackle and then use a line up. So I use one of these to help me line up the holes, and then I can get the bolt started. Alright, so I used a pry bar to move the shackle down, and then I used just my knee. But you can raise the, have an assistant raise up that axle with the jack, and then that'll get the leaf spring to the right height. And then, like I said, just a pry bar. It's very hard to show you. Just a pry bar there, and you can get your height. So now, my goal is I want to get this bolt in from the back here, which is a little tricky. Alright, so it's really hard to explain all the details of this, but you have this dowel pin right here. It's got to drop into the hole. I can't get this bolt on the swing shackle all the way through because the leaf spring is actually slanted towards the outside of the vehicle, or actually towards the inside. So you can see the bolt is too high. So what I need is for the leaf spring to roll towards me, and you can also see that it's not lining up to that pin hole. So the first thing we're going to do is get this pin in the hole, and once that's in, we'll be able to raise and lower, and eventually by raising and lowering, we'll get that thing to go in. So first we're going to try to move this axle to the rear. We're super close here. Raise it up a little. Stop. All right. Really? Yeah. Oh, I went too far. It worked. Okay, hold on. All right, so basically we relieve pressure on the spring by lowering the axle, and then just use a big bar to move this forward or backward. And then at some point I just tapped the axle in the inwards direction and it popped into the hole. So now we can elevate that, Taylor. So go ahead and elevate that. Should be easier to get my angle. See, this is in place now. All right, stay there. So now look, we're almost there. A little bit more. Stop, go back down a little.
Back down.
Go more. Don't go too far though.
That good?
Yeah, stop right there. Okay. It's impossible to record for you guys, but basically just had to have her raise and lower a little bit, and I was able to get this bolt to come through. So now you want to put the nut on there and get all the other stuff situated over here before tightening that down, because if you have to take it apart, you'll be annoyed. You need to compress the shock. It's going to keep coming down on you. So you have to make kind of a quick move once you compress it. That's about where we want it. Down here you can see I did not remove my bolts. So we're going to try to get those. Oh, I'm blind.
Yeah, whew. That's as bright as welding right there.
Yeah. These U-bolts come from a store nearby us that makes U-bolts. Right there in the store they have the stock, and they bend it and they cut it to the length that you need, but they always come to you a little bit off the lineup for the holes that they're supposed to go in. So they basically have to be bent to position them into the vehicle. So they go in, you take them to the bench vise, you try to bend them, you do it again, you do it again, and finally, eventually, you manage to get that line up. It is quite tricky. Not always true on all vehicles, but just in my experience, I found the U-bolts never are quite perfect as far as where your holes are on your truck. So it's just one of those things you have to figure out on your own. In addition, I basically didn't have any more footage at this point in the video because I was too frustrated. My wife was no longer available to help me with the recording, and the main part of the job was essentially done at that point. Thanks for watching. If you wanted to do this job, you could. All you're going to need really is the tools that you saw me use, which is a 1/2-inch socket set, 1/4-inch socket set, and you're going to need a torch, big hammer, pry bar. Adjustable pry bar is nice if you have an adjustable head pry bar. Gear Wrench makes one, but I don't know how readily available that is in local stores. Anyway, this was a tough job in this case. It's usually kind of a tough job lining up leaf springs. That's one of those things you just have to do. You throw yourself at it. You don't let your lack of experience stop you. And I've got good new leaf springs on the front of the truck now. It rides better, to be honest. The old leaf springs were kind of ruined already when the truck weight was on them. They were flipped upside down. That's how I knew they were bad. And I got these back on, and all I did was just tighten up those bolts. Once I got the U-bolts on, I tightened up all those bolts that I had taken out. Obviously, I had to install the little bracket that was underneath the radiator, and then I had to put the front bumper back on. And I can't remember if I took the shroud out. Yeah, I think I had to take out the shroud that was around the wheel. For some reason, I don't think that was in the video, but hopefully this helps you guys, and don't be scared to do it yourself, but you are going to need that torch. Don't even bother. Don't start on it if you don't have access to an acetylene torch, because you'll have a bad day. All right, have a great day. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.